She looked like a corpse. Like a walking corpse, man.
Sounds like my wife.
I've never seen anything like it. I haven't been able to sleep since that night.
All right, calm down, buddy.
For the purposes of this review, I will be going through both the remake and the original PS1 version, which should become clear later on. Now, Resident Evil 2, in my mind, was the peak of the series' more classic style of gameplay. I went on thinking this for years, always referencing this as a fact and not an opinion. So, that being said, I decided to go back and play the original to both build up hype for the remake and for research purposes. Going in, I knew three things immediately weren't going to hold up: the graphics, the tank controls, and the voice acting. These were things I was willing to forgive because they're issues of a time long past. There were bigger gameplay problems that did frustrate me though, like the limited inventory space and the backtracking, which was made worse due to the load times. It turned Resident Evil 2 into a mindless checklist and a game of memorization because the map was practically useless. Then there's the whole ink ribbon shortage, which I did still like as it added some weight to your decisions. Should I save now or wait? I could nitpick about the mechanics all day, but the bad stuff was more annoying than anything else. What really surprised me were the scenarios. For those that don't remember, there was a Leon disc and a Claire disc. Playing through Leon's story first would label that run as Leon A, which would then transition into Claire B. Now this continuation was where things threw me. I thought I remembered both runs being distinct, but for the most part you're repeating the same stuff as the other with slightly altered story bits. Basically, A and B had their own characters and set pieces that changed depending on who you chose, but either way you're still going through the police station, solving the same puzzles, then going to the sewer, etc. From a lore perspective, it didn't really make any sense. So tack that onto everything else, and I found out that I really did not like this game anymore, but that's fine because I still hold it in some great regard for my memory's sake as a child, and because it's important for history. Also, who the heck cares about this cruddy PS1 game when I have the remake now? Surely it's going to fix all of my problems, and more. Let me preface this by saying I've been pumped for this game ever since it was announced in 2015, and I was blown away at E3 2018 when it was finally unveiled in an official capacity. I usually don't do this, but I went into a media blackout after that. Even though I knew the basic beats and I was going to replay the original, I wanted everything to be fresh for the remake. So, on the night of its launch, I turned off all my lights, popped in my headphones, and let the game take me away, and boy, did it. So let's go through my complaints from the original, step by step, and see if the remake fixed anything. First of all, it looks amazing. It's a little darker than I would have wanted, as you can kind of see by the video quality, but that use of lighting, or lack thereof, added to the tension. The detail in the gore is just mesmerizing and gross, which I loved. They maybe went a little too far, but I still dug it. The most impressive thing about this remake is that there are no loads. Well, unless you die. The transitions otherwise are seamless from room to room. Puzzles have been redone too so that the layout makes more sense and has a better flow from one area to the next. Even if you do have to backtrack, which you probably will because there is still limited inventory, the lack of loads made everything a lot faster. So yes, the presentation is top notch, but let's get into the mechanics. Obviously, tank controls are now gone. It's also a lot easier to shoot things now that you can look at what you're aiming at instead of praying your gun is trained on a zombie. Again, your inventory is still limited, but you can find pouch upgrades that will expand it, so at least that's something. Weapons can also be upgraded via random parts, and they brought in various gunpowders to make your own ammo. And I can't remember what game was the first to introduce countering, but it is back. If a zombie tries to chomp down on you and you have a knife or grenade, you can get away unscathed. I wasn't too fond of the knives breaking so easily, especially since ammo can be tricky to come by, even with powders, but it was still great to see regardless of scarcity. Speaking of items though, the remake has made the map overpowered. See, when you find an area's map, it will label every room. It will automatically remember key points like save rooms or puzzles too. Not only that, but normal items that you walk past but don't pick up will also be identified. Plus, better yet, if you haven't seen everything a room has to offer, the map icon will be red. Once cleared, it'll be blue. For the most part, everything has been changed for the better gameplay-wise, but there were a few things that were altered for the worse. Let's start with Mr. X, the trench-coated tyrant that followed the character around in the B scenario in the PS1 version. Well, he's not only back and more menacing than ever, but he appears in both scenarios of the game, which I will get back to in a second. But first, allow me to spoil something very minor. You can pretty much gather everything the police station has to offer before you venture onto the next section. Afterwards, you return to the station where Mr. X makes an appearance. Unlike the original, taking him down will not stop him or reward you with an item. Instead, he'll just take a knee before returning to the chase, so if you weren't great about cleaning up enemies or grabbing everything the first time around, it can be hectic to maneuver through all that stuff while Mr. Stompy is right on your tail. Okay, now let's talk about the B scenario, which will lead me into my biggest gripe with the remake. So, just like the original, you can't see the full, true ending until you beat the second part of the game with the other character. In my mind, I thought both scenarios this time were going to be completely separate. Leon would always start and end the same way, as would Claire. Two sides of the same coin. Unfortunately, that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, this time around, the A and B scenarios are less different from the original versions. Of all the things they could have fixed with this game, Capcom decided to keep the systems the same. Maybe it's just expectations, but this ultimately ruined the experience for me. I'm sorry, I just can't buy that. In my case, Claire would solve the same puzzles, fight the same bosses, and traverse the same places as Leon, albeit with a few differences. It doesn't really make sense. You could counter my anger with pointing out that zombies or anything about this universe doesn't make any sense at all, but I mean, come on, it's lazy storytelling. What's worse is that once you get into the station, the tyrant appears almost immediately, meaning you have to avoid him while exploring most of the building, which is where the game first broke me. At the very least, since I knew what I was doing, my Claire run took me a lot less time to complete. At the end of the day, as good as this game looks and plays, Resident Evil 2 Remake really feels like a wasted opportunity. Playing through the game once, whoever you choose, is a blood-curdling experience that I thoroughly enjoyed, blemishes and all. However, because the second part is so integral to the story, meaning it's the other half of the game, literally, I find it hard to really forgive the good in this instance. From replaying the original and being disappointed to this, reviewing the game was a big heart tug for me. And even if you chalk my negativity up to lost expectations from too much hype, I have to go with my gut on this rating. The only thing keeping me from going any lower, and believe me, I was close, is my love of the series and the wonderment that that first experience brought me. If you like this video and want to see more from me, then subscribe to my channel, and also check out my articles over at The Gamer. All these links and more are in the description notes below. Thanks for watching!